But let's talk about these ego states and why it's critical that we actually embrace the ego and not look at it as a killer to our growth.
Right. Well, I want to correct one thing. There's a difference between our ego, which can get out of control and, really do sabotage us, and a difference between ego states. So when I'm referring to ego states, I'm talking about, it's also known as resource states, parts work, internal family systems, and it's those different aspects of ourselves. So it's not like Eckhart Tolle's interpretation of the ego. It's not Freud's ego. It's not our sort of arrogant ego. This is just looking at different aspects of ourselves. So you're different around kids than you are around your parents, than you are around the guys at the bar, than you are around people at the football game, than you are in church, than you are, we have different hats we wear. And so that's what ego states are, is looking at those different parts of ourselves, getting to know them. How do they serve us? How can we serve them? And how can we choose who we want to be in any given moment?
Ooh, I'm going to love this conversation.
It's a good one. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah. And so when we're looking, this program here, Kathy, we primarily focus in helping individuals understand how to become better leaders, better influencers, because we believe that mentorship and leadership are so critical. We believe that in most professional workplaces, it just doesn't exist anymore. So we're always trying to bring individuals that say, hey, I have some knowledge to share. How does this start to come into effect? If I'm learning to be a better leader, if I'm working with you, I'm becoming one of your clients, and I'm looking to establish myself better in leadership roles. And of course, we always want this stuff to help us on a personal level as well, right? Because we should be able to cross over. Anything we're learning to do in a workplace should be able to be in our personal lives and our family life. How do we start right there? Like, let's just get into that from a workplace setting. Why does this ego state matter?
Yeah. So let me tell you how we get them, right? Because if we don't know where they came from, we don't know what to do with them. So ego states are formed in childhood, and they are our ways of adapting, of protection, and of fitting in. So I love to use the example of Chandler Bing on Friends, right? I think we've all at least seen one episode of Friends where we know Chandler Bing, and he's the jokester, right? He's the class clown. That is an ego state that he developed to fit in, to relate to others, to dispel stressful situations, right? Because as soon as something gets too heavy for him, what he does, he makes a joke. And there was one episode they even challenged him to not be funny for 24 hours, and he couldn't do it. So that is an ego state that he developed. That's his main ego state. So we all have ego states. They are all hardwired into the brain. So these are not psychological constructs. These things actually exist as sort of different characters in our brain. This is different than multiple personality disorder. For any of you who sound, who are thinking, "Wow, how many parts are there?" Well, we have up to 100 parts, and we tend to see about 10 to 15 of those most frequently. It's different.
100? Wait a minute.
100, yes.
100. And you said, and it's about 10 of them.
10 to 15
around with us the most.
That we see most often. And the starting of this, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but the way to start this is figure out what those 10 or 15 are. Right? So, name them. What do they do?
Here I was focusing on the 100. I'm like,
you're focusing on the actual topic. I'm still stuck on, what do you mean everybody should have seen one episode of Friends? I'm thinking, well, do you know our audience? Like, there's two groups, right? Like, you have to be born like before 1985. And then after it, I'm thinking, I don't know if one of my employees have ever seen Friends.
Yeah, that's okay.
Or you've at least seen a preview where Chandler's being funny.
I think they've seen the shirts at Spencer's or something like that, or Hot Topic.
Oh my God, Spencer Gifts. Yeah, talk about being born before 85.
Yeah, exactly. Anyways,
where else can you get your, the stuff for your dorm room, the penis candle, the black light, and the...
Okay, can we
listen, so let me tell you,
ourselves?
yes, we are dating ourselves, but let me tell you why I brought that up.
Yes.
Anita says, shocker. Like, yeah, okay. Listen, Anita, we're not going to embarrass you live right now. We're not going to talk about why I know that.
Friends is a great show.
It's not about Friends. There's way more here.
You brought it up.
So let me tell you why I brought that up. Yes. I found that really interesting because I get it. That piece of that behavior, I get it. Humor has always been a tool I've used my whole life. And it wasn't always about being uncomfortable. as much as it was that it seemed to help, it helped relax certain situations, and it always helped make an introduction. So one of the things that I found was a lot of times people would make their own opinions or assumptions. They would look at me, or I would walk into an area and they were already making their evaluation of the type of personality or character I was by the way I looked, by the way I carried myself. And so humor would immediately open up a room, and it would allow people to recognize, oh, okay, this guy's not going to rob me.
Yep.
Right. And I mean, I'm being honest. You can, you know, this has been my whole life, but at the same time, I found it to be very, very useful in uncomfortable situations.
Yep.
And so when you said that, I connected
state.
Immediately. That's why I brought it up, to be honest.
Yeah. So that's an ego state that is part of you that you have learned to bring up in certain situations. And we all have those, right? But you can't call them at will if you don't know who they are. So you wouldn't walk into a corporation with an all hands on deck meeting and without knowing anybody, just start handing out tasks, right? Because you might have the CEO making copies and the vice president getting coffee and the tech guy answering the phone and the receptionist trying to do IT. You have to identify what their strengths are, what role they actually play on the team before you give them tasks to do. And it's the same way with this internal family, right? We have to know who they are, what their pluses and minuses are. Speaking of that, I should say, all of these states are formed for our own good. They are all there to help us, even ones that are not societally accepted as good, or in our brain we go, oh, I hate when I act like that. That part is there for a really specific positive reason, even the ones that we don't like. So that's important to know.
Interesting.
Okay.
Go ahead, Lori.
So Kathy kind of started to touch on where they came from, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, and that they're there for our own good. Like, when, you know, like a lot of times, like I've heard, like by the time you're 7 years old, your personality is fully developed. Like, when do these actually start? When do these like, would you say like these are formed by this particular age?
It's a great question. Normally they are formed sort of up until the age of like 16 or 17. And you can change them and they adapt. So, you know, if you have a horrible trauma at 20, an ego state that was just sort of a seed of an ego state might start to grow and develop at that point. But my understanding of everything that I've read and studied is it's a formed in childhood thing. And I'll tell you why. Because at that point, we do not have a strong sense of self. Right? As a 7-year-old, we have to sort of almost bifurcate our brain a little bit to figure out how to adapt to things. We don't know that we have self yet. Self, it's a whole another part of the conversation, but just a preview. Self is us without any ego state on. Self is that balanced part of ourselves, and it's these 8 things, right? It's these 8 C's, and I always forget one, so I'm going to read them. Compassionate, creative, courageous, clear, curious, calm, confident, and connected. And from this place of self, we get to choose which ego state we're putting on. And imagine you're talking about leadership, right, and Rigo, and how this is good for our leadership and our personal life. If we are not reactive to things, and that's what gets us in trouble, is that reactivity, right, in communication, in leadership, and relationships. If we can stay responsive and not reactive, we're going to be better leaders, better communicators, better partners, better all of those things. And that's what this work helps us do. Identifying those ego states and learning how to stay in self.
Can you say those again for us? A little slower. I want to hear it.
Compassionate, creative, courageous, clear, curious, calm, confident, and connected.